share with you is very much based on after your three shared values that you laid out, that I support wholeheartedly, is that you then went to the question, which I want to dig a little deeper on, is the implementation of the deal itself. I am greatly concerned that we will not get the deal that we think we are getting. Robert Satloff, who's the executive director of the Washington Institute, expressed these concerns, which I'll share with you, and I'd like to hear your response. He said that the basic punishment for violations of the deal are the snapback sanctions, which are a very strong punishment. But what he said was, it's a problem because there are many, many thousands of ways that Iran could violate the deal. And what are we going to do if it's a mid-level violation or a low-level violation? What if instead of enriching uranium at 3.67%, they're enriching it at 4%? What if instead of whatever 5,000 centrifuges they can operate, it's 5,001, and then it's 5,010, and then 5,500? Are we going to really implement snapback sanctions? The international community going to go back to these snapback sanctions? So I was wondering if you could tell me, how confident are you that the deal that has been publicized will be implemented as it's being sold to the American public? And what are the mechanisms by which that will be implemented? And just to deepen the question, I was a school teacher, and by August 15th, I had spitballs going across my room. Because on the first day of school, some kid probably stood up out of his chair, and I didn't punish him. And then the next kid got up and just said, teacher, I'm going to the bathroom, and walked out. And I might have not done anything. And it escalated and escalated. And so all of us know that the Iranians will try to test the limits of the deal. What gives you the confidence that this administration and future administrations will be scrupulous in their enforcement of the deal and level punishments for each and every violation of the deal, particularly when the main mechanism for those punishments seems to be so great that it would be hard to implement?
That's a great question, so thank you very much for sharing. And let me answer it, I think, in two ways. First, by going into some of the details of how the implementation will work with this deal, and then also, again, stepping back and saying, well, how does this compare to potential alternatives? I think enforcement of the deal is a critical question. At the end of the day, this is not about trust. Anyone who says this is about trusting the Iranians has no idea what they're talking about, because this is not about trust. You can't have trust within a regime like the Iranian regime. They make a business of cheating. So it has to be about verification, and following verification, as you aptly point out, about enforcement. The lines in the agreement are very clear. Now, whether it's 3.5% or whether it's 15 years here or whatever it is, there are very clear lines. There's not room for interpretation. But nonetheless, it's up to the international community to actually stand up when those infractions happen. There's a lot of respect in the international community for the IAEA. They've actually, despite the castigation in various corners, they've been very effective over the long course of the organization in identifying violations. And the good thing about the way that this deal is formulated is that it only requires the United States to snap back sanctions. So it doesn't go before the Security Council, which is actually a prior version that had been explored, which would have allowed Russia or China to veto a snapback of sanctions. It's only up to the United States. Now, I think that we do have some work to do to ensure that our administration, whether it's the Obama administration or a future administration, holds up to holds to that account. And I think that there's a role that Congress needs to play in ongoing enforcement of the deal and supervision of enforcement of the deal to make sure that that occurs. One of the things that I have started discussing with my colleagues in Congress is, if this deal gets approved, what are the next steps that we need to take to ensure, like you say, that it will be adequately enforced? I will say that for everybody who is willing to come to the table and to agree on pretty crippling sanctions, I mean, India, China, for example, their economies have suffered a lot because of the sanctions they agreed to put on Iran. All their incentives are in line to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. They wouldn't have agreed to this idea in the first place, to try to negotiate a deal to prevent Iran from getting a nuke, if they didn't think that was a goal that we all shared. But the second thing I'll say to your question is that, again, you have to put this in the context of the alternatives. And there have been a lot of critics out there who have said they're not confident the sanctions will snap back. And then in the same breath, they say we should negotiate a better deal. So I don't understand how, with the P5+1, when we've all agreed to a sanctions snapback regime that's very clear, it's strict and laid out. If you don't actually believe that when the P5+1 come together and agree on a sanctions regime, that it can be implemented, then how can you agree that scrapping it entirely, completely throwing it out, and then starting from scratch, we can get better sanctions, stronger sanctions in the future? To me, that's just a non sequitur. If you believe that the sanctions, the snapback will fall apart, then you can't possibly believe that we're going to negotiate better sanctions with these folks in the future. We talked to Professor Nick Burns, who was ambassador and led the Iran negotiations under the Bush administration. And he's currently at the Kennedy School. He came down to speak to me and my colleagues in Congress a couple weeks ago. And he talked about the process that he went through to negotiate the sanctions with India. India did not want to put sanctions on Iran. They need Iranian oil. They have a lot of Indians in the Middle East, including in Iran itself. And their economy is very much, they think of their economy in very regional terms. So it was pulling tooth and nail, to quote him, to get India to even come to the table. And he, the person who literally negotiated these sanctions with them, is completely confident that India will give them up, if the deal is rejected. So in a sense, we have a situation today where whether you like the deal or you don't, a lot of this money is going to start flowing to Iran anyway. Because if we reject the deal, the sanctions are going to fall apart. And although your concerns about the snapback, I think, are very valid, and we have to do some work in Washington to ensure that those concerns are addressed. When you put those concerns in the context of a potential alternative,